shared actually made me think of a different question I'd like to ask you. So in my research I was doing on you prior to this, our time together, you told a story about a time when you were at AIT and some soldier said something to you that was inappropriate and you took some next steps. You spoke to someone else about that. Do you mind sharing that story really quickly?
Yeah, that was within my first year, actually, in the National Guard. And, you know, when you are in the National Guard, whether you're Air Guard or Army Guard, you actually go to the normal basic training AIT sessions. And, you know, the challenging thing for me was, you know, I just didn't have the best start. When I think about life overall, I didn't quite have the best start. And so going into the National Guard and getting away, that was the first time that I had ever flown on a plane. So I flew, you know, away on a plane. And the reason why I set that context is because right after basic training, I met a service member and got married. And soon after that was expecting. So I had to go to AIT expecting. And so first off, you had not a lot of women, you know, and I don't want to say not a lot of women, but there were women, but it wasn't too long after women were just integrated into the overall force, right? You know, separate from the way that it used to be where women were separate. And so here I am, a female at an AIT station, and oh, by the way, early on in my pregnancy, and at that time you actually had to show up for pay. And I know people are just like, what does that mean? You had to report. You actually had to report for pay. You go to a table, you sign a thing, you go to the next line, you get your check, you go to the next thing, you sign your check, and they cash it for you, right? Like, it's like really archaic. And so as I'm reporting for my pay, one of the NCOs just said, you know, you're not going to be here long. He was just like, I don't want women in my Army, and you are, you know, definitely, I don't want pregnant women in my Army. Now you say that to a pregnant woman. I was full of emotions, I'm just going to tell you. And so I kind of held my composure, but I was just like, oh my God. And, you know, what I was worried about is I knew that I needed to get through that training so that I could continue to stay. Otherwise, you know, they would put you out immediately, right? And so I was just so worried about it. And the next morning, the sergeant major, he was a commandant sergeant major, happened to come through the hallways. And I would always, you know, like to see him because one, he always looked very sharp in his uniform. But two, he had taps on his dress shoes and you could hear him coming down the hallway. And I was like, man, that is so cool, right? I'm sorry. It's just exciting.
Oh, no, it's just
hear that.
Cool.
It's just so cool. And he knew that something was wrong. And so he stopped, like he had passed me. And I guess because I didn't greet him in the same way, he actually came back and then engaged with me because he was like, no, that's not the way you typically, you know, say good morning. And so he engaged with me in a manner that he started digging deeper, and then he realized, okay, there's a problem. And he's like, don't you worry about it. Mm-hmm. And he really made it so that I finished, you know, my overall AIT, you know, my advanced training, and finished at the top of the class. And so, you know, that just goes to show you that sometimes, you know, people will help you to do the right thing.
So thank you so much for sharing that story. And the reason why I wanted to ask about that story is because I saw two things that was really important. One, you stood out enough that when you were different, he noticed, right? So you didn't kind of just, you weren't in camouflage, right? You were horrible comparison, right? But you weren't, you know, in the background. You stood out enough so that people could see when something was wrong. And so I think that's one of the first components of being politically savvy and or building relationships, is being able to stand out. So I'm going to ask you about that. And the second part is, you were still willing to speak to him? I know you said he did some digging, but a lot of people aren't even willing to speak to people in more senior level positions. And so can I ask you, one, how do you think you went about standing out to that point where he noticed there was a difference? And two, how did you go about building up that confidence that you were able to speak for yourself when he did ask you?
Well, so I've always been very strong, I guess. I think basic training, I'm not even going to say I think, like I loved basic training. That's like really crazy to say. It was like, I got a chance to lead other women. Mm-hmm. And it showed me that I could be a leader. And so basic training taught me how to be, able to speak out for myself, but still be respectful.
Yeah. Yeah.
That doesn't mean that I have to be a quiet wallflower. As long as I'm respectful, I do have an opinion. And I think most people think that in the military, you can't talk, like you can't, okay, yeah, I'm not necessarily in agreement with that. Gotcha. I'm going to go off and do it, but maybe we could do it this way. And I think they feel like it's the military of the old, and it's changed so much from even the time that I came in. And so people, they wanted to hear if you were showing leadership skills, they were willing to listen. Mm-hmm. And so I think even through my class, I was showing those leadership skills, and that trickles up, right? So they want to see who's making an impact. And so I think that's what caused me not only to just stand out, because I was willing to go the extra mile to make sure we were doing the right things for our class. But I think it was just me, knowing that if I didn't speak up for myself and kind of have this conversation, then I may not be there.
Yeah.
And it's a matter of, am I going to let this person stand in the way of me accomplishing what I came here to do? And the answer for me, was really no. And I will tell you, there were some other folks who were more experienced. I had made friends with, some of the other permanent party folks, and I did get some advice. So, they were just like, yeah, you need to speak up, and you can't let that happen, because we've seen this happen to some of the new folks. They were just like, you need to speak up for yourself. And so I will tell you, it's being able to have good people that are willing to tell you, yeah, you need to do what's right.
Hello, everyone. This is Alex Tremble from GPS Leadership Solutions. And if you found this last interview to be awesome, spectacular, and actually you benefited from it, let me tell you, this is only the tip of the iceberg. Visit the alextrembleshow.com, information below in the description, and that's where you'll find the full uninterrupted interview. And I'm telling you, there's so much great content you'll hear from this past leader, as well as all the other leaders we've already interviewed. So remember, don't just look back, reach back. If there's someone who you think will benefit from this interview or any of the other interviews, make sure you share it with them. Click the like, click the subscribe. And as I always like to end all my sessions, stay strong, stay positive, and definitely stay moving.